Welcome back to another edition of Research Fantasy presents our PGA DFS breakdown for the Bridgestone Invitational held in lovely Akron, Ohio at the Firestone Country Club. Should be an interesting event. Last week was certainly an interesting event. I would not have thought Jonathan Vegas to go back-to-back. I was surprised that he won to begin with the first year, let alone winning twice in a row. So, to say that I'm a little bit tilted off of golf is probably putting it mildly after a very strong British Open, or the Open, or whatever you want to call it. Last week definitely did not go as planned. Hopefully, we'll be back on track with things this week. This course is tough. Fairway's tough, green's tough. So, and it also plays long. It's important to say that. Par 70, 7,400 yard course. It's a big, long course. And more or less, we need guys who are going to keep the ball in play here. So a guy like Phil could do absolutely terrible if his shot is not on. He is in the field this week after the British Open miss. I'm sure all of us are very excited to possibly toy around with the idea of playing him. This is also a no-cut event, and there's not too many of these. Also an interesting situation. The scoring here tends to be relatively low, so you could see one-day swings if somebody gets extremely hot. If we think that somewhere between 5 and 7 under is going to win, if someone manages to have an out-of-this-world round, which seems to be the thing these days, as we've seen a couple of different golfers do that at points this year, we could have a swing on the final day, or any of the days for that matter. All right, enough rambling as it is. I want to take a look at 4 guys that I'm really interested in using this week. And let's get things started with Rory McIlroy, 18.5 fantasy draft, 9,600 FanDuel, 11.4 on Draftkings. At the price, I just expect people to play up for Jordan Spieth, and why wouldn't you? This guy has been an absolute monster. Remember that run DJ was having earlier in the year? Well, now the tables have turned, and it's Jordan that's on this hot streak right now. But ultimately, Rory actually kind of fits this course a little bit better. The last time he was here, he checked in with the victory. Last time he played in a DFS slate, he was like 7% owned or less in all of the tournaments I was in. This is one of the bigger named golfers, and I understand 2017 for the most part is like a year to forget for him, but things are coming around. He had a T4, and he played extraordinarily well that weekend to come back and get in the midst of things. He's second in strokes gained off the tee, and I think that he's going to be in prime position to even win this thing this weekend. So he's someone I want. I think he's still going to stay somewhat low owned relative to some of the others in the industry, so he's a guy I want some exposure to. Next up, let's go with Paul Casey, 15.9 fantasy draft, 7,600 FanDuel, 9K on DraftKings. I've heard Casey being talked up a lot early on this week, but the thing is, you don't always want to dodge ownership. If Kershaw is pitching against the Padres as a baseball analogy, you know he's going to be high owned, but the probability of another pitcher putting together an outing that would mirror the likely results of that matchup just aren't really that great. So you just eat the chalk, it's like a dead position, and you move on somewhere else. I'm not saying that's where Paul Casey is at, but I am saying that just because somebody's going to have high ownership does not mean you want to run for the hills. This ultimately plays to his favor. He's been solid but unspectacular. 16th, 17th, 27th in his last 3 starts here. Just not great. It doesn't make you feel overly excited to play him, but everything else from a statistical basis works in his favor. Right now, he's 4th in par 4 scoring from 450 to 500 yards, which 8 holes roughly fall into. I think one hole is like 441 or 442, so it's just about that 450 length. I think that's going to be a difference maker Those guys who could play that distance really well, and knowing that he's fourth there goes very much in his favor. The price is nice. It's not too high. It's not too low. I think it's right where it should be to keep people from playing it, seeing that it could be a value situation. So I like that. He's another guy that's on my radar this weekend. Kevin Chappell, 14-6 fantasy draft, 5,700 FanDuel, 7,500 Draftkings. I have heard very little about Chappell thus far. His price is very cheap on all sites. Finished third here last year in his only appearance in the last 5 years. He's 8th in greens and regulation and top 20 in 4 of the 5 stats in this tournament, with his only poor stat being bogey avoidance. That's kind of a big deal. You do want to have golfers at this course who can avoid bogeys because, again, if they're spraying it or wild or anything like that and they bogey, it's going to be a tough road to come back from. But he showed last year that this course was not too hard for him to handle. Love the price. Hoping that maybe he goes under owned, but something tells me where his price is at. This ship will pick up steam moving later into the week. Finally, a guy who I've been on for the last several tournaments he's played, Daniel Berger, 15-4 fantasy draft, 6,900 FanDuel, 8,300 on Draftkings. His only appearance at this event would have been last year. He withdrew. Other than that, he comes in with 4 of his 6 key stats in the top 10 in his last 12 rounds. He's third in tee to green, which is another major indicator for success. I think as long as everything stays how it has been with Berger, he should be in good position. I love, the price all around. I think he's a solid play. And that will round out my 4 favorite golfers this week. Once again, Daniel Berger, Kevin Chappell, Paul Casey, Rory McIlroy. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. Check us out at researchfantasy.com. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Research and Win. And join us again next week.